What's up, you guys? Welcome back to church. Super excited to have you guys back with us for another episode 49. We're almost at episode 50.
Come on.
I don't know why those nice round numbers always get me excited, like the multiples of 5 or multiples of 10. They're kind of like milestones. Like it feels like we're putting our flag in the ground. And speaking of putting our flag in the ground, there's a topic that Warren and I both find to be a precious thing, a commodity, if you will, or a birthright. And we just have not talked about it. So we felt like, hey, it's time to talk about it. This thing that people work for, this thing that people earn for us, freedom. We're talking about freedom today. And so the first example I always think of is Jesus brought us freedom through his sacrifice. So he immediately was willing to give his life and make sure that we had real freedom for all of the time that we will spend past this life. I also think of, and Warren, this probably has something to do with you being on the pod. I think about our military men and women who are out there sacrificing and giving up at the bare minimum, like the kind of, what would you say, the familiarity of like one home for your lifetime. You know, they travel there, but at most giving their lives and doing so willingly and openly. And then I think about other kinds of freedom, like freedom from stress, freedom from depression, freedom from addiction, things like that. So we're going to dive into all those kind of facets today. Maybe I'm sure we'll bounce around, talk about some financial freedom, what Warren and I find that to be. You won't be surprised to hear us talk a little bit about Bitcoin today. And I think the world is kind of talking about it more too. So
absolutely.
I think over the course of this podcast, some of the things we've talked about have gone from like, 50 weeks ago being taboo to now they're popping up in the mainstream media. So I'm thankful we were a little bit ahead of it on some of the stuff. But I'm just glad to always share truth with people, and freedom is such an important part of our lives, especially as Americans. But in the world, like, we always celebrate freedom when somebody finds freedom from whatever a hardship is or a challenge. I think it's something we celebrate. So looking back over all the topics that we've covered, it kind of just stood out to me. Like, I can't believe it. And the thing that really prompted it was this past week, we've had some social media companies come out and say that they are letting freedom ring once again on their platform. So we'll dive into that a little bit too. But that was really the impetus, the prompt. Grateful that we've been able to say what we want to say on YouTube, and the strikes haven't come. Like we've been able to put it out there and have people look at it. So what do you think, Warren? Freedom, it's just such a big topic, but I'll kick it to you and see what your thoughts are.
Oh, freedom. I think we think that since we are Americans, right, we are accustomed to using the term freedom very loosely. I think as an American, we feel like it's our birthright to be free. We don't want to be controlled. We don't want to have limitations. We just want to be free. We want to be free to do whatever we want, to be whatever we want, and to have whatever we want. And that's how we kind of digest freedom. Freedom is my choice to do and be or have or say whatever I want. But is that true freedom? I mean, is the American ideal of freedom truly free? Right? Because we found out in our own country that we say that we have freedom of speech, but you can't say, right? You can't say, and nor should you probably say whatever comes to your mind without consequence, right? Without repercussion, right? That sense of, is that really freedom to be able to just say whatever you want to say to anybody in this particular country? That's what we're kind of like founded on, to say, hey, you have freedom of speech, but you found out you really don't. There are people controlling, right, what you say and curating what you say and how your opinion applies to the world, right? We know that through media, that media kind of controls the narrative, right? So if you are an American then you have an American ideal because it's been fed to you, right? You sit at the plate of social media, television, and you are fed what is given to you, right? Sometimes you can pick and choose, but sometimes true information is buried, right? So in America, our ideal of freedom is our ability to be able to choose, but the choices are limited, right? And so I think for true freedom really comes from God. It's not wrapped up in the world system of how we operate, of being able to say or do whatever we want. I think true freedom is really wrapped up in God, and it really has to deal with the human condition of sin. I think that guilt and shame is the number one thing that keeps people bound up or kind of locked up in their abilities, in their ability to enjoy the life that God has given them. And I'm not talking about, going out and making a bunch of money. I'm just talking about being able to enjoy what God has placed in your life today. I think guilt and shame from sin prevents us from living our life to the full. And I think our life to the full doesn't mean that we're taking trips to Aspen and we're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a day. I think it just means that we can appreciate the life that God has given us, the freedom to be free from things that hold us down, things that make us not see ourselves the way God sees us. And so I think true freedom comes from having a relationship with Jesus, and true freedom really detaches us from the world system of things and opinions, and it aligns us with God's true vision of us. Right. And if you spend some time in the Word of God, you'll realize that Jesus didn't just come to save us, but the reason he came is because he loved us. Right. And if you go to the core of it, why was he on the cross? Why did he give everything? Why did God give his only begotten son for us to be saved? Because of his undying love for us, because of his passion for us. And if you realize just how special you are to God, right, you'll start treating your life better and start looking at your circumstances as the sum total of who you are. Because there's so many things down here on the earth that keep us trapped. Our self-esteem. This is a big one, I believe. And I think I kind of want you to kind of tap into this one, because the way we view ourselves can keep us from being free. We don't need any outside entity to tell us that we're not worthy, or your credit score is not this, or we will tell ourselves, I don't measure up. You critique yourself daily in the mirror. Instead of loving yourself the way God loves you, you will critique yourself. You will say, I need to work harder. You will put the pressure on yourself to perform, your pressure on yourself to produce. And God's like, that pressure's not for me. Right. And so you're kind of entrapped or imprisoned by your own means, by what society tells you you're supposed to be. And God's like, well, I created you and you're that way for a reason. And even though you may be on a journey of improvement and learning, you can't even enjoy the journey because you're so stressed out about what you're supposed to be. And guess what? You may want to be there tomorrow. And God's like, my destination for you there is 3 years. Right. And so you're going to spend the next 3 years, right, kind of in a prison of, I need to get here. I can't be happy till I'm here. I can't be whole till I'm here. True freedom comes from God when you realize that he loves me just the way I am today. Not for the tomorrow me, the future me, the better me, the vision board completed me. Nope, me right now. That's true freedom. The release of all of the goals, the release of all of the tasks, the release of all of the improvements that we want in our own mind. We've placed them there. No one else did it, right? The freedom to understand that I can enjoy this moment and I can enjoy this journey. And if I don't ever get to where I've envisioned, right, that today, right now, I'm enough. I was enough for God to send Jesus to save me. I'm enough to be amazing today. I'm not on the way to be great. I'm already great right now. And so I believe that is one of the biggest struggles where people are like, are you really free? You know, because that translates over to how you view people seeing you, how you perform in your own life, you know, because, you know, when we walk out of our bedrooms, we are instantly on stage. We are action, you know, it's like, go. Like if you're a father, it's action, you know, and there's no cut until you go to sleep, right? If you have a job, it's as soon as you walk in the building or as soon as you log on your computer, it's like action. If you're a spouse, it's like as soon as you wake up in the morning, roll over, kiss that. It's like action. You are playing roles in your life, right? And how differently would those roles be if you operated in the true freedom of being who God created you to be, not who you've determined that you'll be happy when you reach a certain goal, a certain weight, a certain dollar sign behind your name. I think true freedom comes with being free in today. And so that's just kind of my, overall arching. I know that was a lot, overall arching picture of like freedom and how we view it as Americans. Because I've been around the world a little bit, and I think it's a different concept every place you go. And mission trips are a great way to get out and see the world and see like people who have a fraction of what we have live a life that's just free. They don't care. They don't. And it's like, man, I feel like, how can I not get that concept? I would try to name some countries, but I've been to the Salmon Islands, and I think we went and built a soccer field there, and we dug a well, and people life's so vibrant, and you could take no American and put them there and they would be happy. No American, like running water is not a thing. Central heat and air conditioning, not a thing. Wi-Fi, not a thing. And you're like, and they are happy. They are joyful. They are, and I'm like, you don't really need this stuff, or you don't need the status. You don't really need the goals, right? To really be free, to really have that level of freedom and joy in your life. So Jason, what do you think about kind of those a couple of things I touched on there? I know I gave you a whole dissertation there to kind of unpack. So
no, it's good. I think the one thing I want to say before I forget it, when we move on from it, is you mentioned freedom being like removal, right? So removal of doubt, or your self-esteem being tied to, you're hanging on to guilt and shame and things like that. And for sure that's true. Because I think what happens is, instead of feeling freedom in our life when we come up short, by the way, this is the whole reason that we needed Jesus to go to the cross, is the ways you fell short. Mm-hmm. So to me, the moments that I spend feeling guilt, feeling shame, and letting them overwhelm, like letting them come in and take over my mindset, even for a few minutes, even for a day, whatever that looks like and feels like, it's fear, right? So I think you get frozen in your life because of failure and fear. Like instead of having freedom, you feel frozen, right? So that's what happens is something goes wrong, like you have guilt over a decision you made that you knew you shouldn't have made, or you feel shame because you came up short and failed at something. Well, I think what we do, instead of receiving the freedom that Jesus gave us and saying like, I still love you. Actually, I loved you before that. I love you after that. I think what we do is freeze up because we don't want to feel the fear again, and we don't want to feel the failure again. Right. And a lot of people combat that a lot of different ways, but the real way is give it to God.
Yeah.
Like the real way is sacrifice that on the altar of your own pride. Like let that go, realize you're not perfect, realize that nobody was except Jesus, and that's why his choice to free us through his sacrifice was so important, because we can't measure up to that.
Absolutely.
The other thing I would say is you hit on some of the media stuff, and I think that's true too, is that we like freedom in America, and we really like it in a comfortable way. And so this is the thing, is freedom often, it can be comfortable for moments, like there are periods of comfort because people fought for freedom.
Yep.
But I think one thing culturally that I've noticed is it's possible that culturally we're in that comfortable period. So some of us societally in America and in the world have lost sight of the fact that, like, people had to earn this and we're letting it slide. Because you have to be a generation that chooses to earn this.
That's good.
Right? Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
So for instance, freedom from taxation is one of the first things I thought of. Yeah, here we go.
Let me get my church cup. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I need,
hold tight.
I need to put, man, we need something in the cup, man.
That's right.
But
so
text. Ooh.
All right. Yeah. So the truth is, I read a post the other day or an article that was talking about George Washington crossed the Delaware because of a 2% tax on tea or something, some number along those lines. We get taxed like 20% on our pay, and we are just grinding to stay comfortable. Like we don't push back. We don't. And it is really interesting to me. And I'm not advocating for movement in any one direction, far be it for me to tell people what to do. But I got to tell you, the numbers are striking that like we get taxed 10x what it took to upset our elders, took to upset the generations before us. So I would just put that out there. I think I'm going to leave that there and let people just kind of chew on it for a minute. But like, what are we willing to accept? Right. So freedom, right? What are you willing to accept because you don't want to sacrifice for your freedom? And so how about this? More personally, I want freedom from, what would you say, being unhealthy? Like I want to free myself on this health journey that I've talked about a few times on the pod. But in order to free myself, I have to go to the gym and get sore, get uncomfortable. Like I have to push. And then what people will see on the back end is a healthy, physically fit guy, right? What they may not see is your hours in the gym. And so you have to sacrifice something for the freedom. And maybe I'm using that word a little loosely, but for the freedom on the back end. And so I would say I just challenge myself to think about it more. Like in what ways am I comfortable? And in what ways do I feel like, in what measure would I be willing to be a freedom fighter? Because there's a lot of people that sacrifice a lot of things, and Jesus most of all. And you talked about building soccer fields and digging wells. Well, like the picture that I have in my mind is not like you Navy men and women showing up in the Solomon Islands and being like, drinking little umbrella drinks and like relaxing. Like you're out there sweating and digging and making sure that the soil's ready for a soccer field, making sure the hole is dug deep enough to get water continuously. Like you have to sacrifice something so that it opens up free water use and free soccer field use, right? Those kind of things.
It's good.
So that's the kind of word that keeps ringing to my mind is like, maybe they're synonymous with each other, but to have real freedom requires real sacrifice from someone. And so if you're looking around the room and no one is sacrificing anything for the freedom that you feel, it may require you to do it, or you may be saying, well, I don't need that level of freedom. And so I say all that to say, this is kind of hearkening back to what you said about media, right? So I'm willing to stay as comfortable as I can, even though what I'm hearing occasionally on the television, occasionally on YouTube or X or any of these different platforms, occasionally I'm in disagreement, or not even just disagreement. Like that doesn't ring true in my ear. What you're saying about how incorrect someone is or how correct someone is, how virtuous they are or how evil they are, right? These things, it's like the sniff test, right? And I really believe in that, is like we're built with the ability to tell right from wrong. Like you can sense it as a kid. I have an 18-month-old right now, shout out to Ian. And when he picks up like a wooden block or when he picks up a toy and he decides he's going to test the kind of, what would you say, the consistency of that toy against his brother's forehead, right? Like his, sorry, Aiden, buddy. But, when they pick up the toy swords and they're testing to see what will happen if they strike each other as hard as they can. That is them, right? Kind of testing their limit. But here's what I know is Ian at 18 months old barely using English, knows like maybe 5 words, maybe a little more. Don't want to discredit him. He will whack with a sword and then immediately make eye contact with me. What does that tell me? He knows what he did could receive repercussion from dad before I even react. Because there's times where he'll pick something up and throw it, and it goes across the living room. And when I go to look at him, he's already looking at me like, for those on, the audio, just kind of like sinking the chin down and kind of, but he knows, like, because of past experience or just something innate, like, but he's only 18 months old. We as adults, that's our sniff test, is like when we hear it, when you feel it, when you kind of use discernment, I think, is this pushing towards like the thing you're hearing, the thing you're seeing, the actions that you see in the world? Is it opening up freedom for people, or is it pushing people to some type of control, some type of let's call it lack of freedom? Yeah, I don't want to, there's all different kind of ways, like ways that we get in our own head, right? We get stuck in society. We can get stuck socially. We get stuck and again, it's just the failure and the fear. But freedom looks like sometimes giving up comfort. And so that's my pitch. That's my no matter what it is, like you have to, even you talking about terms of financial freedom, ready? You can't spend all the money. You have to put some aside and have some long-term goals. You have to have delayed gratification in a lot of different areas. That's one of our favorite phrases on the pod, by the way.
It is.
It's just, you have to delay gratification in many different areas if you want future freedom from financial worry, disease, lack of relationship, like the delayed gratification of you being the most important person. Think about that, right? Like if you want the freedom to have open and healthy relationships, you have to sacrifice sometimes being the focus of that relationship.
Yeah.
Right? It can't all be about you. And so I know we're using freedom so broadly right now, but freedom is a feeling. Like freedom is like the state of being, because I think, so for instance, Paul, when writing the Bible from jail, I could argue like he was free. He felt free and therefore is free. Right? Does that make sense? Like it's not like, I know it's a state of being, but it's probably a state of mind too. And I guess we can dive into that. I'm like, while live on the pod, ladies and gentlemen, I am going through kind of the thought experiment of like, is freedom really just a mindset? Because I think you can have all the things. And I've heard this recently I was listening to some other podcast, and I don't want to misquote. But they were saying how they know some wealthy people.
Oh yeah.
And
where are you going?
They don't seem free. Right? They're worried and they just seem sad or some. And by the way, there are some wealthy people that feel very free, but it is not about the amount of money. It's not about the amount of power or the amount of time you spend at a job. It's not about any of those things. It comes back to a mindset.
I'm gonna interject there for a minute, because not only are you on the right track there, you're on the right freeway. You're headed toward the right direction, right? Yeah, because I believe it is something related to a mindset, that where true freedom exists, right? That it's not in a physical set. And I don't think it's all the way in a mindset. I think it's in a life set. I think it's where your life is set towards, is if you really have true freedom. Like, what is your life set to? When you set your life to God, like really in the beginning journey, you're like a baby. You are depending on other people's faith. You are watching other people who believe in God, and you're getting stronger. And as you grow in God, you become a toddler and you begin to trust more. And then you start walking. And then when you've been walking with God long enough, here's a caveat: the things in your life will start to test your faith. And if you keep walking with God, right, there's a choice. There's always a crossroad that comes in there. Okay, this is happening. Am I going to worry myself to death? Am I going to stress out? Am I going to act like anybody else in this situation would act? Or would I act like I'm a child of God? And what does that really mean? that means he created the universe. He spoke it into existence. So whatever I'm dealing with, my problem is not as big as my God. So I need to stop telling my God how big my problem is and start telling my problem how big my God is.
Yeah.
That's true freedom to me. It's my life is set towards God, no matter what happens, right? None of this stuff determines my joy and my happiness and my ability to move around. And I'm a fan of the idea of blowing your life up. And people are like, what are you talking about?
Go on. Yeah. I'm like,
I'm a fan of blowing your life up. And people are like, what? Sometimes life gets to a point where you have collected so many responsibilities. You've loaded your life with so much things that have to happen. So many obligations that you have self-inflicted on yourself. Mm-hmm. It's almost like, it's almost like when you're in debt and you have all this, this stress on top of you, right? And you're living beyond your means and all this stuff, but you did it. You chose it, right? And so if you chose it, you can unchoose it. And sometimes unchoosing requires you to blow it up. That means what people thought you were, they won't think of you anymore. What you obligated yourself to, you're no longer obligated to. It's the ability to be able to walk away from a job. It's the ability to walk away from relationships that are abusive or don't serve you, walk away from situations where you're being used, and walk away from heaviness that you have accepted and say, I'm blowing this up. I know after I hit the TNT, everything else will be different. People won't view me the same way, but guess what? I won't have to carry those things that I've agreed to carry. And sometimes that looks like you got to move states. Sometimes that looks like you move careers. Sometimes that looks like stepping out on faith and saying, okay, God, I really wanted this. I kind of created this mental picture about it and it doesn't look like it's going to work.
Yeah.
Right. And walking away from something that looks really good because, you know that it's going to come with the amount of strain and amount of requirements that you're not willing to continue to keep. So I think that in certain points in life, you kind of got to blow it up because we create these ecosystems of heaviness. Like it's the cycle of I need more. Yeah.
Can I add one? You said sometimes it looks like this instead of this. I think also sometimes it looks like, and not always just giving things up. Sometimes it looks like pouring responsibility into areas where there was irresponsibility, right? So you're kind of adding pressure to yourself, not just, I just want to be clear about, because the metaphor of blowing things up sounds like running away a little bit. Like I don't want to leave people. I don't think that's what you mean. And I don't think that's what we're saying is like, abandon everything. Because sometimes it looks like dig in and do the right thing even when it's hard.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Okay. So go on. My bad.
Yeah. And also on the flip end of that, sometimes there's some things you do need to run away from.
Yeah. I mean, there are occasionally like you're making choices that you know are not healthy for you.
Yeah.
Like I need to run to the freezer and not to the pantry, right? Because the freezer is where they keep the proteins. That's where they keep the stuff that can go bad. And the pantry, if it can live longer than, a month outside of it, like that's kind of like mental model I have to gain. So
it can live on you for longer than a month.
Yeah, if it can live, if it can live in a pantry
it's in the
for
pantry,
a year,
it's got preservatives. That's means it will preserve itself in your body for a long time.
That's right. That's
Twinkies
true.
last way longer than steak. I'm just saying.
100%. Yeah. And you don't harvest a Twinkie from like a living creature or anything like that.
Nothing wrong with Twinkies. Hostess. Hey, I'm just saying.
Whoa. Yeah, you're trying to get branding.
Nothing wrong with Twinkies. I'm just saying. I've enjoyed a Twinkie or two in my life.
I have as well. Yeah. So remember we were talking about guilt and shame. No, I'm just kidding. So
hey, that's key.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
Yeah, so you're right. The concept of blowing up is not like run away from your life, like set it on fire and then hightail it out, run away from your responsibilities. I'm mostly talking about those things that you have optionally like added to your life. Practical examples, right? Sometimes we can attach ourselves to things and we become slaves to it. Volunteering, good, with balance, Yeah. There are places or there are things we can get ourselves tied to. Well, the volunteering becomes so heavy and then you may not want to say no or might have the power to say no. And now it's affecting other parts of your life. You're taking off work to volunteer. You're volunteering 4 or 5 nights a week. And if that fits your life, that's good. But let me tell you, the battle rhythm of that will quickly become a heavy life. Right.
Yeah.
When family members call, they may need your help for this or financial help for this or help and then it becomes a permanent thing in your life. That, and sometimes these things just need to be blown up. Like, okay, I'm going to pause this. I'm going to stop this. I'm going to blow up this, and just realign, myself and kind of simplify, because when you blow things up, all of the complicated stuff kind of goes away and just the main things remain. Relationship with God, responsibilities to family, rest, recuperation, your ability to be able to hear God because you've now taken the busyness out of your schedule. I think we can do so much in our life that we think is so good and so holy that we miss the ability for quietness, the ability to rest, the ability to see vision because we're so busy doing things that are good and not focusing on things that are God. Right? I don't think that God put us down here to spend 24 hours a day, all the minutes in a day occupied with something, and then we fill the rest of it with cell phone. Right? I just don't think that's the way that we're supposed to live. So when I say blow it up, I think that's what I mean. Like blow up some of the optional obligations that were kind of heavily laden. And I believe that if, and Jason, you could probably speak to this. With what you do, you can get called on like any time of day. Like being a campus pastor is like, open line of communication, open door policy. I mean, realistically, you could probably spend hours a day talking to troubled students, students who are going through issues and all these other things, but you have other obligations like speaking and outside events. And also you're a full-time professor and you have a house full of kids and a beautiful wife to love. Right. So, so sometimes you have to be able to walk away from things that are, or choose, to minimize your obligations, right? Just so you can get some freedom back in your life, freedom in your schedule. Because, professor, you only have 24 hours in a day and you got a lot to do every single day, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what I kind of mean. Kind of just, people will constantly depend on you to show up for them because that's what they expect, right? And sometimes those expectations can get overwhelming. And you may feel like your life no longer belongs to you because you are overly obligated to things that are good, but also are draining.
Well, so what I would say is instead of like the metaphor that, and I'm going to tweak it just a little bit. And I would say from my life, sometimes it's not blowing things up. It looks like rehab. Like and I'm not actually, that's funny. I'm not talking about like alcohol or drugs. I'm saying like, it looks like, the flip my house.
Yeah.
It looks like instead of, like it looks like demolition in like a positive way. So like if I want to flip my kitchen or I want to make sure I got a fresh new bathroom. Well, you got to require, it's going to require you to destroy all of the existing tile. It's going to require you to break out some walls or pull the paper, wallpaper down. It's going to require you to quote unquote, blow it up, right? You're going to blow that kitchen up to like put it back together.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty much what you're talking about is like find the areas of your life where they need change.
Mm-hmm.
Like so in order to find freedom in my time, right? The two things that I know to be true is it's okay to say no to some things.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that I have found more to be true is when I'm using my time in a way that I feel like God has designed me for, that I feel freedom. So I've probably never been busier in my career than I am right now in terms of obligation. But it is actually true that I have never felt more free either. Because everything I'm doing, like you were talking about students that need counseling, like those are the things that actually make me feel like I'm using the gifts God gave me for real impact. There were times where I did not feel freedom while sitting in like a cubicle farm or while working on different projects that were kind of more about retail finance and money than they were about the people parts of jobs. And it's okay because I'm providing for my family. But working in corporate jobs, it wasn't, there were moments that were really good and there were times that were good, but there were also moments that like weren't making my heart sing.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't a relational thing. And so I feel like that's probably the, Peter Diamandis is a guy that I've been listening to lately, and he has a thing called, I'm going to forget now. It's MTP. So it's massive transformational, I think is the word, massive transformational purpose. And so what he believes is that each person, when you find that thing, whatever your massive transformational purpose is, and I apologize if the T is a different word. I think that's what it is though. Basically what it is like, why were you put on earth? Like what could you do to bring massive transformation?
It's good
in some area. And I actually think in my life, and I asked Delia, my wife, I said, what do you think mine is? Like I paused the podcast and was like, if you had to say it, and she's like, I think, and she just kind of thought for a minute. She's like, I think it's bringing people together.
It's good.
And I was like, I think so too, which is strange. Like, how do you, now that I know that, I think Peter Diamandis would be like, okay, now how do you help the world do that thing? So for like an Elon Musk, his massive transformational purpose is in technologies, right? Each thing is like, he's bringing Tesla cars, he's bringing SpaceX, and they're catching the rocket and all those things. Like that's his massive transformational purpose, is he's changing the world with that thing, and everybody can have one. So then what is your massive transformational purpose? And I think, and I don't know if Peter Diamandis would say this is me tacking on to that. God gives us that.
It's good.
Like he builds that into us, and then he knows what it's going to be before we even activate it, lean into it. And so if mine is bringing people together, then that makes sense, because as I spend more time at work, as I spend time at doing chapel services and counseling with students, there's actually not a moment where I feel, I haven't felt it yet, where I feel like overwhelmed, right? Where before I could feel overwhelmed because it was one design project after another hitting my desk. And I think it's because I was okay with it. I feel like I was relatively good at it, but it wasn't making my heart sing. Like there wasn't that part of me that was like, this is how I'm changing the world. And so might I encourage everybody listening, like what right now in your life is your massive transformational purpose? Like what is it? And because, by the way, I think figuring that out, like what you're here on earth to do, when you start doing it, even if you don't have as much free time, you will feel more freedom. Like I feel freer now in my current role in a workplace in my life than I ever have. And we probably have way less time. We have the most kids we've ever had. We are the busiest we've ever been. And somehow I feel less stressed than when days I would like sit, if I'm just being honest, I would sit at my desk at work and just think like, man, what am I here for? What's the next thing? And the burden of that, feeling like, I know you're making money, but you're wasting your time. That's hard. That does not feel like freedom. You can gain more financial freedom and feel less free. So
that's true.
Anyway, that's where I was at. And I think I am blessed to say that my financial situation has also improved in my current role. So it's not like, I don't think God takes away, like it's not one for the other. I think as you lean into what God created you for, that's where freedom gets unlocked. And I think it's using the wisdom God gives you in terms of decision-making, in terms of, we were talking about discernment recently, when to say yes to something and when to say no to something, even if it seems good. That's going to unlock freedom in your life, is trust in what God's doing in your life.
That's good.
So, yeah, man, that's what I got for right there.
Dude, that's a hot take right there. One more time. What is that acronym again?
MTP.
Massive.
So I think it's massive transformational purpose. As I'm saying it more, I'm feeling more confident about it. So,
or you just rewrote it, just took their thing. Wow, we just what?
Yeah, I take no credit. So,
massive
Peter Diamandis.
Transformational purpose.
Yeah, he has a podcast called it's not World Changers. It's something like Game Breakers or something, but you'll be able to find it. But he has many different companies, written many books. He's a MIT grad that he came up with a thing called X Prize. And so what it's supposed to do is motivate people to, it's millions of dollars, by the way. And these companies will put up the money, but none of the money has to move unless somebody solves a problem. And so let's talk about, like, for instance, X Prize. One could be desalinating water, because we have so much salt water on Earth. If you come up with a process that can cost effectively desalinate water, I believe that's one of the X Prizes, where you'll get like $100 million or something. I mean, the prizes are crazy high, but they're also the problems that plague humanity, or like massive. Yeah. And so Peter Diamandis will get with other people, or he'll put up the money himself and say, if you can solve this problem, you win an X Prize. And X Prize has been around for like 20 years. I'd never really heard of it because I'm not really in the STEM fields. Like, I was a creative type, but I got to tell you, like, it's a cool motivation. It's like throwing fire on top of people seeking their massive transformational purpose. So I apologize, I cannot remember. He's got a clever name for his podcast, and I enjoy it very much. And he talks about AI and all future technologies. He's very into longevity. So like health longevity and financial longevity and all those things. So I don't think anybody will be surprised to hear that. I was surprised, actually. I found him through a Bitcoin podcast, Coin Stories with Natalie Brunell, and he is a Bitcoiner because he believes it is the way that our financial future will propel forward the furthest, is if we have our time and energy stored in a currency that can't be corrupted forward. So anyways, I found him through that, but I love all of the AI talks, and he hosts different guests on the podcast to talk about future technologies, and I love that stuff. I love future thinking and diving into what it can hold. Anywho, I just wanted to throw that out there. Massive transformational purpose. That's what you asked, the acronym, one more time.
Let's go. Yeah. Good information there.
Like our little 3-minute advertisement for Peter Diamandis. Yeah.
Let's go, Peter.
So,
let's go.
Yeah. So what do you feel like is yours, Warren? I'll throw it to you. What's your massive transformational purpose? Have you ever spent any time thinking about it?
Man.
It's a biggie, right?
That's a big one. I'm trying to like narrow it all down. I honestly believe that God put me on earth to be a father. I mean, I think that's one of the things that brings me the most fulfillment is raising godly children. And but I believe that's maybe a byproduct of my true purpose to be here. I think that I have a true niche for leadership and inspiration. God has given me the ability to walk into situations and walk into complex situations and turn those organizations around, not through proficiencies or efficiencies, but by appealing to the people that already exist in those spaces. Yeah. God's just given me the ability to inspire people to push beyond the norm of life. And that takes, every person is kind of different. But when you bring a certain energy to anything, that energy catches on. It's almost infectious. Yeah. And so I'm a high energy person. It's not a whole lot that I believe that cannot be achieved when you work together as a team. It's amazing how God has made all of us different, but when we come together, we fit together. And I love to build strong teams. I love to win. And I think one of my abilities is to lead and bring inspiration. And so God's allowed, he's put me in places that challenge me, places that I'm not really like proficient in. But I seem to always get to the top of that organization some kind of way, just because of my ability to bring people together behind a goal. to be able to change people who are out of energy into excitement about something. And so I think that's my God-given gift, and hopefully the path of my life helps me to share that with other people. It's the ability to be able to lead a family, to be able to lead yourself, to be able to lead in difficult situations. It's kind of like the person who, when there's an emergency, there are people who run away from the emergency. There are people who call for help, and there's people who run into the emergency. And you need all three of those people, right? Because the person calling for help is going to save the person who's running into the emergency, and it's also going to help the people running away from the emergency, right? So I'm just the kind of person that runs into it, right? And so that's inspiring for people, because I think everybody wants to grow into the person that runs into the fire or runs into the trouble, that hears gunshots and they're like, well, I'm going to get the guy with the gun. Right. So being able to teach that and to be able to inspire people to go for that in their life, because there's a lot of people like, I'm going to play it safe. I'm going to do what everybody else is doing, make it through life, get my gold watch at the end of 40 years and, sit on the beach and chill. I think God's placed me in certain places to light a fire under people, organizations, and so that's kind of my thing. And I think that's my true purpose. I want to leave a legacy of a fearless, God-fearing man. Like, what do you mean he was fearless? If it was on earth, he didn't fear it. He put God first, and then we went after it. So that tenacity to be like, to face problems head on, to address situations head on, and to make change. God's given me the ability to speak to the dormant energy in people, right? The energy that they think doesn't exist.
That's cool.
And the people who are just going through the motions, I got the ability to be like, well, it's truly an opportunity and a blessing to be who you are. And just to kind of see how that affects people and changes their lives. So that's kind of my thing.
Okay. All right. So here may be a step too far. And so you could tell us to stay tuned if you need to, but what does that look like going forward?
Oh man, that looks real big going forward, man. Okay. I feel like we're moving into a position where we're going to be able to share more of this with the world via, social media, through lowercase church, because I believe it's needed in a world where the default setting is to fall in line or to just walk through the motions. We want to really ignite people and put them on fire for life, right? And that really is putting you on fire for God, because when you're on fire for life, this is the life that God has given you. That's his gift to you. Every breath, every moment, his gift. What you do in return is your gift back to him. It's your gift to the universe. It's your gift to your fellow people around you, right? And so I believe that here in the very near future, we will be leaning into this purpose, this mass transitive purpose that God is putting inside of both of us, but particularly with this gift, and share this gift with the world.
Yeah. It's interesting to me. This could be my perception. I'm open to the idea that maybe I'm not well versed in how everyone on earth feels, but it feels like there is a shift or like a wind change coming, where less dedication to self, because we've tried that for a few decades through social media and things, and more dedication to others, more awareness of the need for freedom. And the need for loving other people, the need for caring about other people, and not being so quick to fight or judge or push back, or really caring for others. It feels like there's a wind change, like there's like a sea change, a shift coming in culture. And so I'm excited to see it. There is at least an opening up to all ideas. Like that kind of thing, where it isn't like, again, I referenced it earlier in the episode, but part of the motivation for today's episode is Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Meta, coming out and saying, they're not going to continue to censor on one side of the aisle or the other. Like they're going to run it X style, like Elon did with community notes, where basically what it's going to do is allow people to have conversation, right? Allow people freedom, which will in turn, through freedom, I think we've seen over and over again evidence of it, no matter what people say. I think freedom, real freedom, brings real peace, right? And so that is the challenge of human nature, I think, is that when you find freedom, when you find peace, those create easy times. And this is a cycle we've talked about before, but easy times can unfortunately create weak people, right? Weak people make hard times. Hard times make strong
people. Yeah.
Right. So then it's a cycle where strong people bring easy times. And so I don't know where we're at, but what I know is no matter how easy the times are, I'd like to remain a strong person. And so make the choice to love other people, even when it's hard. Make the choice to bring positivity and truth, even when it's not a popular thing to do. And I think through the truth, we find freedom, right? Through those things, through being honorable, we find the ability to encourage honor in other people. And I think maybe that's the idea, is like not even living by changing other people, but living by example.
Yeah.
And then making sure that you maintain that.
Yeah.
I think that's it. I hope that you talked about legacy a minute ago. I hope that's my legacy. And I know that it's something I work toward, but the truth is it might be some of my motivation is like, could be, we talked about this earlier, and it's something that I just want to openly admit, like even I still combat it, where it's guilt and shame over past decisions, man. Like even in the moment, being aware like of how I talk to my wife, because man, I don't ever want her to feel that way when I spoke to her sarcastically or I spoke to her in anger. I don't ever want to feel the burden of somebody not trusting me, because I know what it feels like when you lie to people and then they find out and you have to carry that damage to that relationship. Man, I really don't want that friendship to be hurt because I make it all about myself. Like, and so guilt and shame can create a reference, but it's not something we need to have define how we move forward.
Come on.
Like you feel guilt and shame because you know something needs to change. So I could feel guilt and shame for being overweight right now, or I can use that guilt and shame and be like, that's my motivation to go to the gym. And really my motivation isn't the guilt and shame. It's the freedom I'm going to feel once I know I put in the work.
Yeah.
It's looking to a brighter future, if you will.
That's
and
good.
I think that's real freedom, is like seeing the horizon and moving towards that, knowing that there's more to this because God has a life for us.
Yeah.
Right. And choosing him and putting him first in what you're doing will feel like freedom, because if you're following God's path, it's going to be maybe even as challenging, even as different as it might feel, as weird as you might, events that you might come across and things like that may be, it's going to be the right play.
It's good.
So seeking freedom looks like sometimes sacrifice, but looks really like trusting God with his plan. So that's what I got. I'll let you wrap with any final thoughts you have on freedom.
Cool.
Yeah. You always do you're the mic drop king of the universe. And so
the one thing that comes to mind when I think about freedom, and this is practical, you don't know, you kind of don't know what it feels like until it's being taken away.
Okay.
I've had the privilege of being in positions where my freedom was taken away. And here's a practical one. Got pulled over by a police officer, right? I think it was a routine traffic stop. He pulled me over, may have had an expired tag or something. Not sure the remember, but I remember the feeling. I wasn't speeding, but it was late at night, and it was in Washington State, and it was very secluded area, just me and the police officer. And I remember the feeling of being detained, and I didn't know which way it was going to go. And I was like, I knew I hadn't done anything like wrong or anything that warranted to go to jail. You know what I did? I think I went through a yellow light that went red. I ran the light. Let me just say I ran the light. Okay. I thought it was yellow and went red, right? But he was sitting across and was like, woo, right? So all my papers are good. Everything's, good. I'm in a pretty nice car. And I just remember the feeling of being held there. Like, okay. And I am, surprise, a black man in America.
Get out.
This is, this is a Caucasian police officer, right? And so immediately before he gets out the car, I am thinking of everything of like hands on the wheel. I come from a law enforcement background. I'm a military guy. So I know, let me put the officer in the most comfortable position, right? And this may be controversial, but let me just tell you, if you know the game, play the game within the rules, right? This is not a time for me to be like, why are you pulling me over? It's not a time to argue. It's a time to submit to the authority of the police officer that is behind me, right? And so I'm hands on the wheel. He walks up, license, registration, I give him all the stuff. He tells me to take the keys to the car, put them on the roof of the car, and he goes back to his cruiser, right? And so I'm sitting there and I'm just like, man, I don't like this feeling of being held and I don't know what's next. Right. I don't control what's next. Even though, he may just be checking whatever they check when they go back and check. Right. And thank God for law enforcement. My son's a police officer, so this is not a slight against police officers, but this is the experience. Right. And so he takes like 30 minutes. Oh, and I'm just sitting there and I'm just like, wow. Okay, this is like, when will I get free from this situation? Like, I had somewhere to be. I don't want to push the issue, but it's like 30 minutes. And he comes back and he's like, the reason it took so long is because you out of state tags. Want to make sure you didn't have any warrants. It was a whole type of thing. And he was like, you're clear, good to go. Didn't even get a ticket. Just didn't get a ticket. But I remember pulling away from that situation, like, man, right. I'm not going through any more yellow lights. Right. Just thinking how do I prevent myself from being detained, losing my freedom, again. And that's a very well, you weren't really not free. Like, well, yeah, you kind of are. Like they have authority over you. When I think about freedom, I think about losing the ability to move freely through life, because the God-given thing that we all have is choice.
Yeah.
And when you do things in your life that take away your choices, you lose your freedom. You see, God gave you choice. He doesn't even make you love him. He does not pin you down to the ground and say, you will serve me. It's your choice to serve God. It's your choice. When God gives you life, he gives you choices. When you do things in your life that removes your choices, right? That's when you truly lose the freedom. That's when you truly are locked up. And so whatever decisions you're making today in your life, because we can make them, they can be financial, they can be criminal, they can be career bound. When you do things that take away your choice and your ability, I want you to know that superficial lack of freedom or that imprisonment, most of it's in our minds, and it's where we've set our life. So I persuade you today to turn your life back to God, and you'll realize just how free you are, that you are free to go. Right? Yeah. There's nothing holding you back. You may think that whatever you're into, whatever you're stuck in is going to pin you down forever. And I speak to people like this. I know people are struggling financially. That's why bankruptcy exists. There's always a way out. That if you're in a bad relationship, if you're being abused, there's always help, right? Set your life towards God and you will see freedom start to flow back into you. And it brings back your choice, your ability to choose. I ended with this: choose God. When you choose God, you choose freedom.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really real. That's really good. Thank you, Warren, man. I knew it would be good. I am going to ask you now if you will pray us out, pray that people's freedom would be unlocked.
Absolutely.
So thank you, man.
Absolutely. Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you, God. God, we thank you for Jesus who sacrificed all for us to be free. God, today, help us to point our life toward you, to focus on you and what you've created us for. Help us to find our mass transformational purpose and lean into that purpose, God. Help us to be free from all those things that we superficially think are holding us down. Help us to understand that only you sign our report card. That it doesn't matter what the world thinks about us. Help us to focus our efforts on you and freely moving through this life, making the choices that you want us to make. God, today, I hope something that we said, something we talked about, invites someone to have a conversation with you, that their life may start to change in this moment. God, we just thank you for freedom. Help us to walk in it, live in it, and be that. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. So good, brother.
Good,
Love
man.
it every time, man. Love it every single time. So I feel freer already.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's go.
All right, brother. I will we'll see you on the next one, guys. It'll be episode 50. And you will be surprised, because I know we'll be surprised, because we have not talked about what we're talking about yet. So we'll see you on the next one.
All right.
Later.